Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Educated Collins Snap channel. How you doing? So today I have a pretty interesting video for you guys. I was working on a token shop update list for May, essentially, and I wanted to use some stats in it. So I took a look and went to Untapped GG, had a good setup. And what I did was for every single Series 3 card, I plot down where it would be in terms of play rate and win rate, and just put those in their own tier and made a tier list based on that particular metric. And some of the results I thought were pretty interesting that I just wanted to talk about this particular tier list itself. I've already probably uploaded the token shop update list, so if you want like it refined into an unlock guide, you can definitely check that video. But I just want to talk about the particular data I got, how I plotted it, and some of the interesting tidbits you can glean from it. So let's continue. So first things off, right? When it comes to using data, I did want to kind of share the methodology of it or so. So essentially, I'm using Untapped GG, which is a good website for a lot of things, right? But I'm currently using their, um, I believe, deck tracker. So here they can search by latest patch, which I think a lot of the other websites need to have because it's like they're the other websites are not as good essentially at this. But here you can search by latest patch, and I'm using pool 3. I'm using rank 70 to 100, so that's like the competitive people that are trying to make infinite. So they're like infinite players, kind of they don't care, so their data is a little bit wonky sometimes. And just kind of looking at play rates and win rates essentially. So what I did was I kind of put down every single card. So like for example, let's put out like Agent Coulson, right? And then I looked at some of their first few decks, right? Looking at their play rates, their win rates, and kind of drawing that down in terms of having high win rate, low win rate, okay win rate. I could have said average, but I put it okay win rate, and just kind of plotting that all down. So it's comparison in itself. Obviously a little bit of it is subjective because I have to kind of look in and compare every card and say, oh yeah, this is in this bracket, this is in that bracket. But overall I think a lot of the data sets match up, and I just want to kind of talk about that in essence. So here we have the full data, everything laid out here. And here we have at the top, it might be hard to read a little bit, but like it says massive play rate, high win rate, and then high win rate, high play rate. Then we have high win rate, okay win rate, and then low win rate, okay win rate, and then low win rate, low play rate. So it goes from the top. The higher things are pretty much all win rate related because win rate is the main factor, but play rate kind of makes you more confident that this card is consistently good. So the higher the play rate, the more reliable that card is in that metric. Where things with low play rates, even though they might have a good win rate, it's not as reliable as something with a massive play rate and a high win rate. So overall, there are some things in here that like jump out to me that I would definitely want to talk about. I don't know if you could see everything as clearly, uh, but hopefully you can see everything pretty clearly, so I don't have to like full screen. And I like seeing everything at once. First thing I want to talk about is the outlier, of course, right? Sarah, this thing compared to everything else was like not even close. Its play rate, its win rate was like very, very high. So I'm just like, oh, this card is the best. If you look at the token shop update, I definitely used this information to say, oh, this is the card to get. But I thought that was cool that there's one card out of all of them that was noticeably different than everything else. That was pretty cool. And then we have some losers, I would say. There's Lockjaw all the way here. It has an okay play rate, but the win rate is pretty low, not reliable at all. And that's a huge drop in terms of power. It used to be like the Thanos King piece, but the nerf really did hurt it. that it's significantly worse of a card to play with. So definitely a little bit sad. We have these negative win rates and play rates. So these are just like, I can't recommend them at all. I'm definitely considering putting Series 4 and Series 5s in this, but this was for my token list. So like depending on the feedback, I might, update and add the other pieces. But I also want to talk about some of the, like, there's a lot of archetype clusters in here as well, where because uh, cards are built in specific archetypes, they all tend to have the same win rate, the same play rate because they're played together, right? So that's something like here in this thing where high play rate, okay, win rate, that one you could say these cards are overvalued because they're played a lot, but their win rate isn't like massively better than other cards. They're kind of okay win rate. But you can see Hazmat and Luke Cage would be in that tier. We have Patriot, Mystique, Ultron, Wasp, Debris. They're all in that same tier. You have Junk as well, right? You have Viper in there. Valkyrie's played in Viper a lot. Green Goblin, like, so the clusters of deck building all kind of work together, and they have like very similar play rates and win rates because they're part of core decks, even though they're different cards. I thought that was pretty cool. Beast and Falcon are in the same group, and then some like Galactus is like carrying some cards. I would say, like, I'm not saying Destroyer is a bad card, or something like Spider-Man and Doctor Octopus is a bad card, but you know that it's Galactus carrying Spider-Man, Doctor like you know that's what's going on here. And definitely there are some winners. Like Polaris is a really consistent card. It seems in a lot of decks that you play Polaris, it's a good deck, and Polaris is in there. Goose as well surprised me in terms like Goose, the Hood, Polaris. Those three I would say surprised me, like how good they were, how much they're played a lot, and they win a lot. Like their win rates are very good. So those three I was like, oh wow, I wouldn't have thought, because usually when I'm looking at unlocks, these ones make sense. Death, yeah. Doctor Doom, yeah. Electro Wave, yeah, of course. Destroyer, I could see it, right? But the Hood, Goose, like those ones, a little bit interesting to me in terms of like how much people play it comparative to some of the other cards and how good of a win rate they do have. Rock Slide is being carried by Darkhawk like completely. Like that's what's going on. It's Darkhawk carrying Rock Slide for sure. Darkhawk's really popular right now, and Rock Slide is in all of the Darkhawk decks, so it just has a huge win rate. It's not that Rock Slide's like insane, but that's what's going on. She-Hulk makes sense, and some of the other cards are like Surfer decks are actually pretty good right now. So Juggernaut's taking and Juggernaut's also pretty good in Storm decks. So Juggernaut's getting that benefit where it's the decks they're playing. It's pretty good. It wins a lot. Agent Coulson underrated, I think. Maximus is strong. Arrow strong. Quinjet. All these cards make a lot of sense. Brood also in Surfer decks, but also in Patriot and stuff like that. Some things I do want to talk about is some of these like these okay win rates, right? I think stuff like the okay win rates and the okay win rates high, okay play rates high win rate. These are like maybe underutilized, right? Because their play rates aren't special, but their win rates are a lot higher than their play rates would justify. So like Beast bounce decks seem to do very well. Basque is really good. Dracula is really good. Okay, so Spider-Man is because of the Jeff deck. That Jeff deck is carrying Spider-Man like crazy. It's also carrying Black Bolt. These two cards, they're being carried by the new Jeff Stature deck. That's what's going on. So these have their play rates isn't super popular because they're not common, they're not meta cards. But there's a meta deck that includes those two cards, and that meta deck is like it's very strong and it's boosting their play rates. So you're like, what is Black Bolt and Spider-Man Miles Morales doing here? It's because there's a deck. I definitely want to make a video about that deck itself because I made what did I make? I made a simple to complex tier list. I'm a tier list guy right now. Like this is my tier list arc. But I made that tier list, and I got a lot of questions like, "What in the hell? What is Def Stature?" And I was like, "Oh, it's this new deck." So I definitely think I need to make some type of breakdown or whatever to kind of help people with that particular deck because it seems pretty unknown, I guess. But I thought this was pretty interesting. Cullen Wing also does pretty well. It seems decks that use Cullen Wing with the swarm mechanic tend to perform better in discard decks compared to other discard decks not doing as well. So it's like the only discard card in its own, like series 3 at least, in its own like group compared to other discards. Because when you look at like Black Cat, it has a good okay win rate, but it's not played much. Hella, what same thing? Okay, win rate not played much, right? So, it seems Cullen Wing apparently has played a lot more decks, and it has a high win rate, not an okay win rate. So definitely the win rates will like justify where these are, but based on how much is played, that's where I will say, oh, this is a high play rate. A lot of mental calibrations, making sure that they balance. I had to like double check a lot of cards because like, is this right? Like, is this like next to the next card? Those kind of things. And then we can look at some of the bottoms, some of the losers. Like, I'm happy that I'm not surprised by anything at the bottom. Essentially, nothing at the bottom really surprised me. Here, these cards aren't played or their win rates are bad. It makes sense to me. Here, there was nothing like, oh yeah, I guess Mojo. I would have thought Mojo was a little bit better, but the win rates were not helping. It seems it's kind of a junk archetype, I guess, in where maybe it's good, but I guess it's too easy to kind of ignore the card or make it bad or so, and people are running Killmongers all the time, so I could see why its win rate is not helping its case at all. So definitely some interesting data here. There's only 2 cards here in the low play rate, low win rate. So they didn't have negative win rates, but their play rate and win rate were like very low, noticeably lower than a lot of other cards, Wong and M'Baku. But they didn't have negative win rates, so they're not bad. Well, I mean, they're not the worst. But like comparative to a lot of cards, they're like, they're not anything special. And yeah, Lockjaw really struggling here. Absorbing Man's has had like a deck that it's okay with. It was like Toxic Sarah that was okay with, but everything else was just not working for it. So definitely an interest. It's a hard card to make work. I do agree with in terms of how you want to utilize. I do think this card can definitely get better. As more cards are added, I think this card could get better. But right now, right, which is the data, the latest patch is the data that I could use, and in the latest patch, it really wasn't doing much. And then here, okay play rate, okay win rate. These might be maybe underutilized a little bit, right? Marvel Leader, Magneto, Shuri. These cards make sense. They're not too surprising. A lot of the Shuri archetype was in low play rate but okay win rate, so they're not particularly bad. You can see Red Skull and Taskmaster are both here. That makes sense, right? Not a lot of people are playing Shuri anymore to climb in the 70 to infinite range. Maybe you can have fun with it later on, but as a climbing metric, really wasn't doing much. You can see the Hela discard engine as well, right? You have the Invisible Woman, Hela, Hellcow all together, Ghost Rider as well, all together, even Black Cat, right? So a lot of the archetypes tend to be in the same position, but it makes sense, right? Like, you're really only playing Black Cat if you're playing a Hela discard deck, like for climbing, essentially. There might be people experimenting, but I really looked at only the climbing rank 70 to 100. So if you're playing Black Cat, you're probably playing a Hela deck, so their play rates and their win rates tend to be similar, so they end up being bunched in the same tier in the list, and I thought that was pretty interesting. So there's definitely a lot here. This is just something I found fun. After a bit, I was like, oh, this is pretty interesting here, and I wanted to kind of share with it. Hopefully, I will post the tier list itself, and I'll probably post it to Reddit because Reddit loves this stuff. I gotta tell you, Reddit. I mean, they're just like me. They're like, "Oh, this is interesting." But yeah, hello if you guys are from there. But definitely, thought it was pretty interesting. Definitely want to know your thoughts on this. Should I mean, you guys will tell me to do whatever if I ask to do whatever. But I'll see what the numbers say, and I'll see if I'll do more based on the viewership. But overall, that is the list. I guess I could do a little bit closer. You can kind of see some of it. I mean, making it closer is not that. It's not much better in my opinion, but you can kind of just see some of the stuff. I'll just post the actual tier list. But I thought it was pretty interesting to kind of group them together and see some of the similarities. There's definitely some cards being carried by other cards, like Typhoid Mary is definitely being carried by Shuri and Sauron. Sauron actually making this a little bit better, right? Because you're like, oh, this has better. It's a better tier than the Red Skull and stuff like that. It's because Sauron's really carrying this card in particular and stuff like that. So thought it was interesting. I was like, oh wow, I was surprised, right? Goose and Dex, right? But that's because of Surfer, I would say. Surfer doing a lot of damage. So, anyways, that's all I got. Take care of yourselves. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. I did, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Educated Colin Snap. Once you watch him, you won't go back. He'll teach you to marvel snap. Your skill